Let not your heart be troubled. There she is. I got the football.
Oh, you know,
and by the way, this is a Hannity original football. Stop making fun of my football.
I have one question. Is that a regulation size leather football? That thing looks like it was made in China.
No, because this is a Hannity football. This is special. This is unique. I don't copy other people. We lead the way on this show.
My 7-year-old could catch that one. That's an easy one. I want a big Hannity football that's made of leather, made in the United States.
Listen, I will sign one to Laura Ingraham. Best wishes, Sean.
As long as you don't say Ingraham, I'm happy, Sean.
Yeah, that's true. I always call you Ingraham. All right, Ingraham, take it over.
It's still funny.
Have a great show.
All right, come on. Throw it to me.
All right, ready?
All right. Oh, Raymond just threw that. Raymond threw it. I don't know if it was all that good of a throw, but good evening from Washington. I'm Laura Ingraham. This is the Ingraham Angle. What a day of bombshells over the Mueller investigation, Trump and Stormy. But NBC's bombshell exploded in its face. That's always fun. We're going to tell you how their big wiretap scoop, well, missed the mark just a bit. And remember Rod Blagojevich, the former Illinois governor? Well, his wife is saying that he was railroaded by Mueller and Comey's best friend. Tonight, she's here with a message for them and a warning for President Trump. And Ben Shapiro is going to join us to defend himself against the outrageous accusation that he incited a deadly attack on a mosque. But we begin with NBC walking back its big story today that the feds had wiretapped the phones of the president's personal attorney, Michael Cohen. Now, the story now has a lengthy correction on top saying that 3 senior U.S. officials disputed that report. The correction explains that Cohen's calls were monitored but not wiretapped, big difference, and that investigators didn't actually listen to his calls. Well, Fox News has confirmed that at least one of Cohen's phones was monitored with a device that records phone numbers dialed and the length of those calls. And even before, by the way, NBC realized its mistake, Giuliani correctly shot down the report, telling the Daily Beast, "We think it's going to turn out to be untrue because it would be totally illegal. Disclosing a wiretap is itself a federal felony." Wow. Well, all of this came after Giuliani emphasized that the Trump team will no longer sit idly by while Mueller's investigation creeps into every part of the president's life.
This started as collusion with the Russians. No.
Right.
Now they go to obstruction of justice, collusion among the players. What they're really trying to do is trap them into perjury.
Right. So let's talk about...
And we're not suckers.
Let's get into today's developments with former White House Press Secretary Ari Fleischer, former Whitewater Deputy Independent Prosecutor Saul Weisenberg, and former FEC Chairman Bradley Smith. Oh, guys, we have so much to get through. I want to go to you first, Bradley. There was a moment during the interview this morning with Rudy Giuliani where he again reiterated that this was not a campaign contribution, and then he added another thought that seemed to contradict the first thought. Let's watch.
If we had to defend this as not being a campaign contribution, I think we could do that. This was for personal reasons. This was the president had been hurt personally, not politically, personally so much, and the First Lady by some of the false allegations. That one more false allegation, 6 years old. I think he was trying to help the family. And for that, the man is being treated like some kind of villain. And I think he was just being a good lawyer. Imagine if that came out on October 15th, 2016, in the middle of the last debate with Hillary Clinton.
So to make it go away, they made this
Cohen
payment.
didn't even ask. Cohen made it go away. He did his job.
Bradley, do you see my point there? I mean, it was all during the campaign. I mean, it was all October, whether it was 3 weeks before the election or 2 weeks before the election. I wasn't quite getting that particular point and whether it makes a difference in terms of any FEC violations.
Right. Well, I don't know exactly, I can't speak for Rudy what he was thinking, but the basic law on this is that many things that can influence a campaign are not campaign expenditures. So, for example, if a candidate thinks, hey, I'd look great in that new suit, he goes out and spends $1,800 on a suit, not a campaign expenditure. Got to pay for that with his personal funds. You know, if he thinks, boy, I'd do better on this grueling campaign if I had a week at Martha's Vineyard first, not a campaign expenditure, personal expenditure. And the rule on this is not that something related to the campaign is a campaign expenditure. It's not that something primarily related to the campaign is a campaign expenditure. The FEC rejected both those options. It has to be something, an obligation that would not exist but for the campaign. And I think that there's a strong argument, at least from what we know publicly, that a man like Trump could say, look, we would have made these payments. Celebrities have to make these kinds of payments all the time.
Right, which is what Rudy said.
Yeah, and he would have reasons like his, protecting his family, protecting his commercial viability, just not wanting the distraction, all of those things that might have made him do it. The New Yorker has run an article suggesting he's made similar payments in the past, which would suggest that it's not something pertaining to his candidate. And even Stormy Daniels, if we are to believe her, said in her 60 Minutes interview that as far back as 2011, she was told not to say anything about this, suggesting that long before he was a candidate, they wanted to keep this quiet. So I think that there's a very strong argument that this is not a campaign contribution and not a campaign expenditure, and it really doesn't matter whether Cohen paid it or Trump reimbursed Cohen. If it's not a campaign expenditure, it's not going to be covered by campaign finance
Does it all go
laws.
to state of mind then, Saul? I mean, the state of mind of Donald Trump, when he was reimbursing, during what time frame? Is that relevant here to look at this? Because again, the way Bradley just described it, I completely understand that. But the way, of course, it's being reported across most of media today, it is, burn down the house kind of stuff. Your reaction?
Well, I would never burn down the house for this kind of a campaign law violation, assuming that it is one. I mean, this is not the crime of the century. It's relatively small potatoes. Bradley's more of an expert on election law than I am. I've always thought the test was here, is it for the purpose of influencing the campaign? And so I think it's always going to be a question when you do something 11 days before the campaign, but it's really ultimately a fact question, and by no means would it be easy to prove. But again, in the grand scheme of things, it's relatively minor. I can't imagine any president being impeached, much less prosecuted for a felony for that. It doesn't change the fact that Rudy isn't really talking about it in a very intelligent way, and that it's very dangerous to go on television and start talking about what your client said and did.
Ari, I want to play for you a montage of media comments today about this wiretap issue. Let's watch.
And they were able to get text, emails, and wiretaps on his many phone lines leading up to the raid and continuing. And
if you're involved in conspiracy, if you're involved in a crime, or if you're involved in just dirty tricks.
Or a cover-up, or an obstruction, or trying to get rid of evidence.
As Danny often says.
If there's evidence of a crime, I don't care if you're the president's lawyer. Get the same treatment I do. You go to a judge and say, I want to listen to his phone.
Okay, well, turns out that didn't happen, and you wonder why people call it fake news. They were positively jubilant all day, like, we're going to have the recordings, we're going to be able to listen, and it's Cohen and the president, and they're destroying documents. We're just guessing. I mean, the speculation about what the conversation might have been if Trump actually had a conversation with Michael Cohen, I'd never heard anything like it. Your reaction to this media feeding frenzy?
Well, the whole velocity and direction of the press is to blame Donald Trump for everything. And that's been a constant, Laura. It's been since he became a candidate, and it's accelerated since he became president. So when NBC hears about something like this, and they really haven't explained how and why they got it wrong, they just run with it, and then everybody else wants to run with it too. It reminds me still to this day, Laura, CNN, MSNBC, and CBS have never explained how they put a story on the air saying multiple sources read a memo saying that Donald Trump Jr. had advance notice of the WikiLeaks. Now, they had to retract that because the person reading the memo got a date wrong, and the notice was after the WikiLeaks was aired. But they never explained how they possibly could have all had multiple sources getting that story wrong, because the threshold is so low for anti-Trump stories. And it's hurting journalism. It's one of the reasons America is splitting into two, frankly, where you have people who don't trust the press, don't believe the press, and other people who just hate Donald Trump. It's not healthy for the country to have the press get it wrong like this.
Yeah, and then, by the way, Michael Avenatti, the attorney for Stormy Daniels, we invited him on the show tonight. He declined. He said he was otherwise occupied. But he also was out there saying this is a fact. And I've noticed they're treating him like he's just an objective analyst, whether it's about the law or whether it's about what happened. And he keeps saying it's a fact. And you see these journalists going, like stroking their chin. It's a fact. And of course, that wasn't a fact. It wasn't a fact at all. And
they treat Michael Avenatti the same way they treated Adam Press Play Schiff. If either of those two say anything anti-Trump, they can get on the air instantly and have no cynical, tough questions asked.
Bradley, I want to go to you on this other development that we learned today, that the email that Michael Cohen used to, I guess, facilitate or finalize the deal with the payments to Daniels was a Trump.org email. Does that have any bearing on this case and how it will be looked at by Mueller, who we know, and we're going to get into this next segment, we know can be, overzealous, and he pushes the boundaries of the law to get the result that he wants. I mean, I'm sorry, but it's not the first time it happened. He saw it with the Blagojevich case. So let's talk about that a little bit. The Trump.org email. They're making a huge deal of this also in the media tonight.
Of course, I can't say what Mueller's going to do, right? But I'd go back to saying, look, again, if it's not a campaign expenditure, if it wasn't made, if it wasn't an obligation that would have existed, that would not have existed but for the campaign, then it doesn't matter how it was paid. In fact, you would expect it not to be paid with campaign funds. You'd have to come from somewhere else. In fact, this is one of the problems, Laura. Imagine if the Trump folks had paid for this with campaign funds and reported this as a campaign expenditure. I can guarantee you can bet the farm that a lot of the same people critical of the administration now, critical of Trump and the campaign, would have filed complaints alleging that this was an illegal diversion of campaign funds for personal use. And that's the problem that you have here. That's why we have a personal use doctrine. So in other words, they were going to get him coming or going. if he spends campaign funds, they'd say you can't spend campaign funds for that. That's personal. If he spends personal funds, they say, oh, that had to be to benefit your campaign, and that's illegal. And it can't be both.
So let's move on to the monitoring of perhaps text messages. Who was being texted, not the content of it, but who was being texted, and the monitoring of Cohen's phone calls. Like, to whom was he speaking? What number was he speaking to? So not the content, but the log of the calls. Is that surprising to you, unusual to you, or what would that indicate that Mueller believes?
No, it's actually standard Well, first of all, remember, the campaign finance stuff is not Mueller. That's the Southern District. So this is a Southern District issue, not a Mueller issue. But it's relatively standard operating procedure, and you don't need probable cause for that. It happens in hundreds of thousands of cases throughout the country. And by the way, on this NBC thing, if NBC had talked to anybody who's knowledgeable about federal criminal law and white-collar cases, they would have immediately said, that can't be right. That story can't be right because, as Giuliani's right about this, that's a crime to leak something like that. That is incredibly serious. It's more serious than leaking grand jury information. And I knew the story couldn't be right when I heard it. Why didn't they check with somebody who actually knows something about federal criminal law before going with this? I don't understand it.
The Southern District, what it finds, Saul, however, if it finds something in all those documents that they took from Michael Cohen's various places of residence, and anything relates to Russia or tangential to the Russia investigation, that kicks back to Mueller, correct? So the Southern District could be used as a proxy to get information for Mueller, right?
Yeah, if you were cynical, you could call it a proxy.
Yeah, I am cynical about this whole operation. You're right, I am.
Bingo,
you know me after all this time, Saul. I'm a little cynical about this, yeah.
Yeah, but
I'm a former defense counsel. You're a former prosecutor, so that's the lines that we draw. But we love each other.
Well, I've been on the defense side longer than I've been on the prosecution side. But you're right. If they come across something that looks like evidence of a crime and it's in Mueller's bailiwick, it does go back to Mueller. But there's really nothing unusual about trap and trace monitoring. It's like mail covers. You're just seeing what numbers are they dialing. How many times are they talking to this person? But they're not actually getting the content of the message.
So if they see that Cohen, after his offices were raided, made a phone call to a White House number, they can, put the screws on Cohen and say, to whom did you speak and what did you speak about, right? He can refuse to answer, or they could try to get someone they're interviewing at the White House to answer that question, right? Otherwise, they're not going to find out what happened, unless there were contemporaneous notes kept.
Right. But I can guarantee you, as a general matter, they're going to be putting the screws to Cohen across the board. That's just very obvious from the way they're conducting this investigation. And the question is, what do they have on him? What do they have on him that has nothing to do with the president?
All right, let's talk. Just hold on one second. I got to play this for Ari, and then we come back. Ari, today at the White House briefing, I knew that this was going to happen with Sarah Huckabee Sanders, and indeed, the press focused right on, well, you said the opposite about Stormy Daniels. Let's watch.
Could you explain why the president, when he answered questions to reporters a few weeks ago about the $130,000 payment from Michael Cohen to Stormy Daniels, why the president was not truthful with the American people and with the people in this room?
As Mayor Giuliani stated, and I'll refer you back to his comments, this was information that the president didn't know at the time but eventually learned.
How are the American people to trust or believe what is said here or what is said by the president?
We give the very best information that we have at the time.
Circle May 3rd on your calendar, because this is the day that we will look back on in this briefing where Sarah Sanders made it so painfully clear that she has lost credibility with the American people, with the reporters in that room.
I think it's hilarious for CNN to talk about losing credibility with the American people right there. That really stuck out for me. Ari, what about that with Sarah Sanders? I mean, she goes out and says what she knows. I thought that was a low blow, cheap shot by that CNN political director.
It's tough. And look, that's a hard job. It's especially hard when you're giving incomplete information as the press secretary. And if the incomplete information is given to you by the president, you're particularly vulnerable. And I think that is what happened here. Look, when the president was on Air Force One and when Michael Cohen answered the question about payments and he said the Trump campaign or the Trump organization, they were being precisely accurate, but they both omitted crucial information. Sarah, when she briefed the press then, and she said no payments by the president, either Sarah went one step too far and overspoke, or the president gave her information that turned out to be incorrect. I don't know which of those two is the fact. But the timetable, Sarah is 100% right. It is entirely reasonable for the president not to have known with specificity what Michael Cohen did in October of 2016, but he learned it later. That makes all kinds of sense. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if that's the usual routine between Michael Cohen and Donald Trump. Michael Cohen cleans it up, doesn't fill him in on all the details, and the president's happy not to know all the details. And that probably extended years back. It's a pattern. So, tough day to be the press secretary, but there is an irony in the day NBC gets it wrong, and media, CNN, as you point out, Laura, has regularly got it wrong, blaming the press secretary for getting something wrong.
It was interesting that today, and we'll go to Bradley on this and Saul, George Conway, who's the husband of Kellyanne Conway, I've known George for 25 years. He's a really smart lawyer. He decided to tweet out I believe it was a regulation. There it is. Which unfortunately, there it is. Yeah. So he says not considered the candidate's personal funds, and then he, recites the relevant part of the statute. And that was considered to be interesting because, of course, he's the husband of Kellyanne Conway, and it would lead people to believe that George Conway, another smart lawyer, is saying he is trying to influence, or he was trying to influence the election with this Michael Cohen payment. To me, that seemed like a huge leap, Bradley, and it was like a head scratcher for me. I love George, but why the heck are you sending out that tweet? I mean, he doesn't know the background on this, and I guess neither do any of us. This is still being developed.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we've had for the last year is people are always letting conclusions outrun, the facts on the ground. The statute does say, and Saul mentioned this, that the statute basically says an expenditure, a campaign expenditure, is something for the purpose of influencing a campaign. But that has to be considered in conjunction with other definitions of the statute. And another part of the statute specifically says what are not campaign expenditures. And things are not campaign expenditures if the obligation would have existed irrespective of the campaign. Like I say, like buying a new suit, getting a haircut, or for some people, I suppose, having to pay off
Settling
people
lawsuits.
who are harassing you with threats. Yeah.
Or nuisance suits. Saul, I want your reaction to that. A nuisance suit, if it was a pattern of conduct for this operation, it's a huge organization. He's a big target as a celebrity. This probably, could have been done before. Was done before? I have no idea. But if it was, that goes to the effort, the intent issue.
It's a fact question, like I said. 11 days before the campaign, it's going to be a fact question. The reason I think George, I don't know him, but I'm going to call him George. I feel like I know him. The reason why I think he sent that out is because Giuliani said, oh, the president paid for it with his personal funds. Ergo, for sure, it's not a campaign violation. I think he's just pointing out that it's really not. It's not who pays the funds. He's not saying it is a campaign violation. He's just saying it's not who pays the funds. It's for the purpose of it. And I think he's right.
All right. Well, maybe he's just saying I'm smarter than you are, and I'm sorry. I'm just teasing. Thanks to all of you. I got it, and they don't. The Russia probe, by the way, isn't the first time Mueller and his pals have been accused of trying to railroad a big-name politician. Our exclusive interview with Blago's wife and her lawyer coming up. 15-year sentence for corruption. Vargas argued that the governor was the victim of overzealous prosecution by then U.S. Attorney Patrick Fitzgerald, who the writer called Jim Comey's best friend, and that it was then FBI Director Bob Mueller who in 2008 authorized a totally unnecessary and ruthless pre-dawn raid of the governor. Here with us exclusively are Blagojevich's wife, Patty, and Chicago attorney Len Goodman, who represents the former governor. It's great to see both of you. Patty, your husband's been in jail for now 7 years of a 14-year sentence. He was convicted of on a couple of different corruption charges, was bribery and extortion, I believe. And I think when people hear that, they think, oh, he must have taken a bribe. He must have promised to do something for someone giving him money, and he must have been heard, or there must have been documentary evidence saying all that. But in fact, none of that happened.
No, none of that at all. Laura, for me, listening to your show, it's almost like Yogi Berra says, it's deja vu all over again. 10 years ago, these same people, Comey, Fitzgerald, Mueller, used these out-of-control prosecutors and FBI agents, came after my husband with their unchecked power to undo an election by the people. They came after my husband like this. These people are so far from Elliot Ness, they're a million light years away. And these are politically motivated opportunists who use their offices for their own personal enrichment, to further their careers, to sell books.
I don't think Bob Mueller needs. Yeah, I don't think Bob Mueller needs to further his career. I mean, he's been FBI director. He's esteemed by Republicans and Democrats. However, he also authorized, and Lana, you can get in on this. He did authorize a raid that was kind of reminiscent of both Manafort and Michael Cohen. This pre-dawn raid. The kids are there. Everyone's shaking. They're afraid, and they go in and they kind of take everything out of the apartment. Same thing happened with you guys.
Completely unnecessary, of course. In a white-collar case, they could have called the lawyer and Rod would have come down and surrendered. To do that to his two young children was disgraceful.
And I think, look, we have to remember that Patrick Fitzgerald, for people who are watching, who will say, why are you talking about this guy, Patrick Fitzgerald? Well, he's representing Jim Comey right now. They're best buddies going back to the 80s, working in the Southern District of New York. There he is. He went after Scooter Libby, outrageous prosecution. He went after Conrad Black, the core part of that conviction, ultimately overturned by the Supreme Court. And, of course, not once but 2 times, they tried Blagojevich. And the court, sadly, didn't take the case a couple of weeks ago when they could have cleared up. this ridiculous federal bribery statute, which is extremely confusing, wide enough to drive a truck through. And yet he's praised for being, he's the most esteemed person. He did the Enron investigation and the Enron case, but there were problems there too. Andrew Weissman overstepped it with Arthur Anderson. Arthur Anderson ends up getting, exonerated. Meanwhile, they laid off 85,000 people in the interim. So, people hear prosecutor and they think, they're civil servants. They're protecting us. In some cases, they are. But they have unchecked power oftentimes, and it can be out of control. And I'm sorry, but as I speak as a former criminal defense attorney, Len, I don't want to be on my high horse here as, it's always the defense is always right. It's not. But if they want to get you for something, they will get you.
It's true. And, Blagojevich was investigated. They began investigating him early on in his administration. He and his family endured 5 years of investigation. He sat for 2 interviews with the FBI because he was somebody that believed in the system and believed that they were, interested in doing right. As Patty said, he was never took a bribe, never took a kickback, never tried to enrich his family. He's one of the only elected officials that has ever been prosecuted for corruption based on political acts, fundraising, and doing political deals. They went after him. They have when the federal government invests resources and their credibility in making the case that somebody is corrupt.
Right, whole case tonight. But I have to say to the people watching, Bob Mueller, Jim Comey, and Patrick Fitzgerald. Just because they're smart guys and went to great schools and have done some good stuff in their careers doesn't mean they always get it right. And if you're overzealous and you have a history of being overzealous in high-profile cases, we just listed 3: Patrick Fitzgerald with Conrad Black, with Scooter Libby, and now his pal Comey and the involvement in this. You got to start asking tough questions. And Patty, I'll let you speak. I know you have a heavy heart and a lot on your mind. But if you could tell Donald Trump one thing other than pardon your husband or commute a sentence, what would you tell him about Bob Mueller, your experience with him?
Well, I mean, I think the president knows that when people have unchecked power, it's a very dangerous thing. And, the role, we believed in the courts, and we believed that the court system was going to work properly. And so if and that unfortunately our trust was misplaced. We thought the justice system was going to work. We believed that, people operated in truly and honest, with true and honest motives. And we were sadly mistaken. And, this is something that he's seen now, unfortunately, what we've gone through 10 years ago and what we've been going through for the last 10 years. This is, if they can bring down my husband, who is the governor of the 5th largest state, for asking for campaign contributions, absolutely no one is safe in this country. Not a single donor is safe, and not a single politician who has to ask for campaign contributions is safe.
Thank you both for being here tonight, telling your story, and President.
Thank you.
And litigating the case in the press is very difficult. But at some point, I guess they feel like they have no other option, given the enormity of the special counsel's office, the power they have, the manpower they have. They got a lot of legal eagles working for them, and now Trump has beefed up his team. So I guess it's bring it on. Thanks to both of you. And by the way, immigrants in that caravan we've been talking about at the border have begun applying for U.S. asylum after trekking more than 2,500 miles. But their American organizers are very impatient with the legal process.
The fact that they can't move this group of 150 refugees isn't a lack of capacity, it's a lack of political will.
Stay right there for my exclusive interview with the Mexican ambassador to the United States, who has the very latest for us. Don't go away.
It's Ace's biggest grill event of the year.
The best time to buy a grill from our exclusive lineup of premium brands.
Plus, come join us this Saturday at our Neighborhood Barbecue Fest. Enjoy great grilling demonstrations and more at your local Ace.
Ace has the latest models from Weber, Traeger, and more. And right now, get free assembly, free delivery, and free fuel on our top grill brands, $3.99 and up.
Don't miss the biggest grill event of the year. Happening now, only at Ace.
Ace is the place with the helpful hardware, folks.
Hello, I'm Mike Lindell, inventor of MyPillow. Thanks to your support, you've helped make MyPillow become one of the fastest growing companies in America. Over the last 12 years, you've helped MyPillow create thousands of jobs right here in the USA.
When I got MyPillow, I'm asleep almost immediately. I stay asleep at night and I wake up more well-rested in the morning.
That's why I invented MyPillow. My patented fill adjusts to your exact individual needs and helps keep your neck supported and aligned.
Call or go to MyPillow.com. Use the promo code and save over 50% with Mike's 4-pack. You'll get 2 MyPillow Premiums and 2 Go Anywhere pillows. It's one of his best offers ever. Order now.
With our 60-day money-back guarantee, you have nothing to lose. Sleep well, America!
For the best night's sleep in the whole wide world, visit MyPillow.com.
Most of those caravan immigrants are now in the United States for processing and are expected to file for asylum. But the group's American organizers are vowing to get every single one of mostly those Central Americans into the country and to stay permanently. Meanwhile, the DOJ has sent dozens of prosecutors and judges to the border to make sure those asylum claims are valid. They have their work cut out for them. Let's discuss the situation as it relates also to Mexico, as this caravan is now kind of an annual thing. Geronimo Gutierrez, the Mexican ambassador to the United States, is with us. Mucho gusto.
Mucho gusto, Laura.
Embajador. All right, I'm not doing the whole thing in Spanish, although it's tempting. Let's talk about what's happened here. I mean, I think people initially were wondering, how do people do this annually? They take this long trek through Mexico. At one point, the Honduran ambassador to Mexico actually marched with the migrants, saying he was on orders to do that, which was wild. But how do they manage to get across the border into Mexico and then for weeks make their way up to the U.S. border? Is Mexico doing enough?
This event really started several years back to calling attention on human rights fundamentally in Mexico. And the United States and Mexico are obligated by international law on asylum matters. And the truth is that in this year, the caravan got so much attention mediatically that people were much more interested, and some of the people actually that were not original in the caravan
joined it.
That's the truth. The caravan started with around 1,300 people.
Most coming from Honduras.
Most coming from Central America.
Yeah.
And the truth is that I can understand why here people get the perception that the Mexican government is not doing much, which is certainly not the case. First of all, I'll give you the figure that over the last 10 years, Mexico has repatriated around 1.1 million people, according to law and due process, international and due process. And
how many of the caravan folks did you deport?
Well, from the caravan, many of them were repatriated, around 260,000.
Deported, repatriated.
They were repatriated according to legal process.
Okay.
And
do you know how many?
Around 260.
So there were 1,000 initially?
Several other actually were offered some form of humanitarian assistance or regularization in Mexico, and some of them indeed got to the border.
Didn't most of the people, though, not want to stay in Mexico? I mean, I kept saying, if you want to get out of trouble in Honduras, why not be part of Mexico or apply to asylum in Mexico? There's something called the safe. Mexico has to be called a safe country, correct?
That's correct. It is in the interest of both the United States and Mexico, I think, to make sure that wherever migration takes place through our countries and between our countries is legal, safe, and orderly. And that's where we're working. In fact, we have very good cooperation with CBP and DHS. We don't see eyeball to eyeball on everything.
All right.
We are in favor of securing the borders and having secure borders.
No wall, or you don't care about a wall as long as you're not paying for it.
I think we left that chapter behind.
I'm never leaving it behind. Not the Mexico part paying,
but the truth is, no. Sometimes Mexico is frustrated. Mexico is in favor of having secure borders. We don't always share the same view as the administration here on how to achieve that goal.
Yeah, I got to play Vicente Fox because he was on my show not so long ago, former president of Mexico. Very interesting guy, very colorful figure. Let's watch. Okay, so we shouldn't have a border.
God didn't create borders.
Do you have a fence at your house?
We shouldn't have a border like you don't have with Canada.
Do you have a fence at your house?
This will happen in this next generation.
Okay.
Because we are going to be on a one-to-one.
No border. Is that a common feeling in Mexico that they get rid of them?
No, to tell you the truth, I actually served with President Fox. And
that was wild, though. No border.
I do have to disagree with him on this one. Borders exist for good reasons, and good borders make good neighbors, and that's the truth. That's not certainly what everybody believes in Mexico. We believe in having secure borders. And again, we're working very closely with the United States in that regard.
What about your southern border? I know the United States is actually offering assistance in the southern border. It's not a lot of this stuff's not public, but is trying to help you secure your border. It's how long? It's about 800 miles long or so. Is that right? Or am I getting the figure?
We work in our southern border. We're working very closely with different agencies from Mexico on security matters.
But people are streaming across, though, right? You got 1,000 of those caravan members came across.
But again, if you look at the numbers, Laura, you will see that we have work, again, according to international law and due process, and repatriated over 1.1 million people the last 10 years that are essentially coming through our southern border.
But why is Jeff Sessions, if you guys are doing your job, why is Jeff Sessions saying this? Let's watch.
We are adding 35 assistant United States attorneys to the border to prosecute illegal entries into our country. We're also announcing that we're moving 16 or 18, actually, immigration judges to the border. We are not going to let this country be overwhelmed. People are not going to caravan or otherwise stampede our border.
People are just outraged about this. I mean, I got to meet you a month or so ago, 2 months ago, and you lived in Texas. I mean, if you were American, you'd be a conservative Republican. Let me just say that about the ambassador here, okay? So you're in a tough pickle, though, because we've now had a 238% increase month to month, year to year, from April of 2017 to April of 2018, 238% increase of illegal border crossings. That's southwest border, not coming from Canada.
But the numbers, Laura, if you look at the year before, they were way down.
That's because Trump had the tough rhetoric. We're going to build the wall and Mexico's going to pay for it. And everyone's like, yeah, I'm not going to I'm staying back in Guada. I'm not going to go up and make that trek. Again, Trump's not going to let me in. But Trump's letting people in. We're doing catch and release. I'm blaming us for this, not you. We're catching them, processing them, and saying, bye, have fun with your sponsor, then they never come back.
But the truth is that both Mexico and the U.S., I think, have a shared interest in making sure that whatever migration takes place is legal, safe, and orderly. Right. And we do need to make sure that there are sufficient avenues for that. I think that if you look at the history of immigration to Mexico, you will see that a lot of the Mexicans that have come to the United States did so because they did not have an opportunity or very good opportunities in Mexico. And that's not the fault or the responsibility of the U.S. That's on us. But the U.S. should also recognize that there's a need for those people here. And, Mexicans don't have a chip implanted in them saying, go and break the law of the U.S.
Well, the Mexican migration is actually down to the United States.
It's way down. It's way down.
But the Northern Triangle is up. That's where a concerted effort between Mexico and the United States to stop these people from making the trek. Because if it's 200 are getting in under asylum, which is phony, sorry, we're going to have 2,000, then 2 million. It's going to keep getting worse and worse. I'm telling you, Mr. Ambassador.
Yes, but last year, that's why we had the U.S. and Mexico co-convene a meeting which took place in Miami to address both the development side of the equation and also the migration and security side. We should do more of that. We cannot be satisfied with what is going on, neither Mexico nor the United States nor the Central Americans. But we need to work on both sides.
But look, I mean, in Mexico, we had a lot of remittances going back to Mexico for years and years. Those are down now, but they're still hefty. It's a good amount of money. Mexico likes those dollars coming back in. You don't want the guns from the United States going to Mexico. We don't want the drugs from Mexico coming to the United States or the cartels or the human traffickers. We don't want any of that. But I'm telling you, Honduras, they love the American dollars going in. It's 19% of their GDP.
Well,
you're smart. You went to Harvard. I only went to a small school in New Hampshire. 20%, let me do the math. That's 1/5 of the GDP, right? That's a lot.
That's a lot.
So, well, it's good to have you on, and will you come back? And I think there's a lot Mexico and the United States can do to improve its relationship, and I'm optimistic about NAFTA. I'm going to say that right now. Are you optimistic?
I'm moderately optimistic.
Okay.
We still need to tackle some issues.
Yeah.
NAFTA is very important for the U.S. and also for Mexico. I think there's a serious and a good faith effort on both sides, or the three sides actually, to get it done. And I think next week will be crucial.
If we have a left-wing new president of Mexico, there ain't going to be any. The NAFTA is not going to be a good deal. the renegotiation won't be a good deal. Got to get it done now. Mr. Ambassador, thank you so much.
Very much.
Really great to see you. And stay right there. Free speech on campus. Ooh, is there any? Ben Shapiro defends himself against allegations now that he incited a terrorist attack. No kidding. That's next in our Defending the First segment.
As a control enthusiast.
Well, you all know Ben Shapiro. If you don't, where have you been? He's become one of the nation's leading figures in the effort to preserve free speech, especially on campus. He's also been the frequent target of leftists who are trying to shut down his speech. Well, what's the latest attempt? I was waiting for this. Okay, this is a campaign now to blame Ben Shapiro for inciting a deadly terror attack on a Canadian mosque last year. We welcome back to the angle Ben Shapiro, the editor-in-chief of the Daily Wire, and he looks so unassuming and like, Ben, I don't know, what do you weigh? 150 pounds? I mean, you're like
about 165. I'm bulking up. Come on.
But I'm saying, like, you don't look like all that intimidating. I mean, you write stuff and you go on TV, but explain how you are allegedly involved in inspiring this horrible attack on a mosque, because you made comments about Islamic terror in the past and it was all stitched together?
So there's this evil piece of human crap who shot up a mosque last year, and this evil piece of human crap happened to be somebody who had seen some of my tweets on Twitter, as prosecutors found. Now, he'd also seen tweets from people like Brett Baer. He's seen tweets from you. He's seen tweets from a bunch of different people. But I guess my account was the one that he had viewed the most. Now, I have 1.4 million Twitter followers. So I guess the idea from the left is that if somebody views enough of my tweets, they're inevitably going to become a terrorist. Weird that I don't have a spate of enormous terrorism across the country thanks to my Twitter following. But of course, none of this is real. I mean, when a Bernie Sanders supporter shot up a congressional baseball game, people on the right did not say this was Bernie Sanders' fault. Bernie Sanders incited the violence.
We play
this
fair,
is a crazy
though, Ben.
person.
Yeah, we play fair, and they don't care about those rules. So what their goal is, and this is why we bring you on for this series, their goal is to intimidate other conservatives using you as an abject lesson. We're going to use you as an example. Don't speak out on these issues, because if you do, we don't care. We could be in, it doesn't matter if it's in Canada or Australia or anywhere else. We are going to brand you a hater. We're going to try to stop your livelihood, stop you from making money, stop you from getting speeches. That's what this is about, is it not? So it's this malcontent in Canada who's kicking up a fuss. We've seen it with the Southern Poverty Law Center with their obscene list of Islamic, Islamophobes or whatever. And I think I'm on that list. Ridiculous. But they do it to shut down speech.
No question. If you're going to talk about the SPLC, by their same logic, they're responsible for the attack on the Family Research Council a few years back, since the guy who shot up the Family Research Council was a follower of the SPLC and used their map of hate groups as a target. So all of this is really dangerous, and all of it is leading to an attempt in the United States by people on the far left to imitate what we've seen in places like Britain, in places like Canada, to actually shut down dissenting points of view if those dissenting points of view do not meet with the politically correct standards of the left. So the fact that I've tweeted out about the evils of radical Islam, and I cut a video talking about the percentage of Muslims worldwide who may believe radical things based on polling data from the Pew Research Center. This apparently was enough to blame me for a terrorist attack that has nothing to do with me, that I have obviously denounced, that was, as I say, committed by an evil piece of human debris. But again, all of this is nonsense generated by the left specifically in order to shut down free speech. That's their goal.
All right. Kanye West has become a very interesting figure on the cultural scene, no doubt, expressing his love for many people, but among them, most controversially, is Donald Trump. And now he's gotten attacked by everybody, comments he made about slavery being a choice, which is not obviously what he meant. But now it turns out that we're seeing, perhaps connected, we don't know, an increase in support among African Americans, especially African American men, double support to, I guess the figure is, now it's up to 22%. It was 11% approval. Now it's 22%. Where the overall approval was also increasing, I believe, to 16% from 8%. That's interesting. Is it just a coincidence here with Kanye West?
It's impossible to tell, obviously, whether it's a coincidence in this short period of time. But I will say this. What Kanye did by basically saying, think for yourself, if that's such a threat to the left, it demonstrates how the left has to use identity politics to shut down any real debate. Listen, I don't think that Kanye West ought to be nominated for head of the Heritage Foundation, right? I don't think the guy is spending his off hours reading Frederick Hayek. But What Kanye did say here, which is very simple, is listen, I'm not just a black guy, and I'm not just a Hollywood celebrity. I'm an individual with my own thoughts and feelings. I get to formulate my own logic, and I also get to figure out what I believe. And if everybody else thought like this, then perhaps we ought to be able to have these conversations that we haven't been able to have so far. Good for Kanye West for at least beginning the conversation. I mean, I'm stunned that it's Kanye doing it, but the guy gets all the credit. I mean, it is a pretty amazing stand that he's taking at a time when he doesn't have to take it.
Oh, I just think he's trying to say to people, you don't have to be imprisoned by your past. As hard as it was, as abusive and unfair and unjust as it was, it doesn't have to define your future. And a lot of philosophers have said that over the centuries and, frankly, over the millennia. You can create your own identity. Hillary Clinton was out there yesterday, day before yesterday, a Q&A about socialism, America, whatever. Let's watch.
You may be the only presidential candidate since World War II that actually had to stand up and say, I am a capitalist. And you did. Did it hurt you?
Probably. I mean, you know, it's hard. It's hard to know. But I mean, if you're in the Iowa caucuses and 41% of Democrats are socialists or self-described socialists, and I'm asked, are you a capitalist? And I say yes, but with appropriate regulation and appropriate accountability. You know, that probably gets lost in the, oh my gosh, she's a capitalist.
All right, Ben, like one sentence.
She actually told the truth. Good for Hillary. She finally stumbled across something that is true, and she said it. Democrats are tending toward socialism. What can you say?
Inadvertent, but nevertheless, she was bundled up quite a bit there. Up next, religious liberty, the White House, and Donald Trump. What he did today. Stay tuned.
Hi, I'm Johnny Bench. After a Hall of Fame